It's such an honor to be here. This hit me on the morning. I drove in from Nashville, Brentwood, that area, a little north of here, and the drive this morning was gorgeous. I don't know if you guys realize it, but I think we're peaking right now. And when my kids were younger, we drive. I had 5 kids, and we would drive, and at this time of year, they would always be hearing me when we drive by a beautiful color. I'd say, sensory overload, sensory overload, and as they grow older and older, they realize and they laugh at it and stuff like that. But it's just something inside it. I come to this church, and I see this, and I'm thinking, heart overload. You guys have got the heart of a church that's on mission. It's just an honor to be here, and it's great to be here. I got here a couple months ago. Matthew and I were talking at work, and we got talking about different stuff, and eventually got a little talking into some politics, and he said, "Well, do you believe in free speech?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Would you mind giving one?" And so I said, so I'm excited to be here, and I think first let's pray. Let me pray. Lord, thank you for these people. May you increase and may I decrease. In Jesus' name, amen. I have a chance today to tell you this story about both hands, and there's a lot of parts of this story and that make it all make sense. And every story has to start somewhere, and this story starts on Christmas Eve, 2001. The kids are all in bed. I'm headed to the attic to get the stockings to hang by the chimney with Kara, because that's my job. And I get up to the attic, and I look around, and I see a high chair, I see a crib, and I see a stroller. And the thought occurs to me, we've got everything we need to raise another child. And I should tell you what led up to that moment, okay? I was on the board of Bethany, and we were talking about a lot of adoption stuff. And, well, let me tell you why I was on the board of Bethany. Okay, because I worked it started off when I was a college student. This is where it begins. I sold books door to door. It was a great summer job. It taught me a whole lot about life and people, and the senior vice president of the company led me to Christ. I mean, it was an awesome group of men and women who I think taught some great stuff with Southwestern. And I went with Southwestern full-time after college. I was there for about 20 years after that. I had the opportunity to work with a lot of young people in the Midwest states, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, and Iowa. Well, every year Southwestern would have a meeting here in January where like 800 students from around the country would come to Nashville for a couple days and just get fired up for the spring semester. Well, I had a pretty good group by then. I probably had 50 of those were my managers, and the first thing I get greeted with by one of my main leaders, he comes in and he says, "Oh, by the way, Deb Brigham is pregnant. And she's scheduled for an abortion next Wednesday in Iowa." And my heart sank. And I mean, I got in touch with my wife. My wife knew the organization real well. She actually sold books when she was a college student. She was actually one of my students. And that's a good thing. Okay, that was good. So we had a 3-year-old and an infant. For some reason, I don't know how it happened. We got childcare for 2 days. For 2 days, my wife spent time with Deb. Just walking around, talking to Deb, there's other ways to do this. Praying for her. She was contacting other people to pray. We tried to get her to see a sonogram, and get a picture of this baby. Talking about there's other options here. There's a lot of other ways to handle this situation. And Deb every time was just like, no. And then we said, "Well, tell you what we'll let him do. We'll let you live with us. Come down here from Madison." She was a student at the University of Wisconsin. "Come down here from Madison. Just live with us while you're pregnant. And we'll take care of everything, and then we'll adopt the baby, and you can go back to Madison and just move on. And things will be okay." And she was just, no. And she left. I remember the students all left on Saturday afternoon. I'll never forget that feeling on Saturday, just like, we prayed, and we just felt like we'd failed. Somewhere on Interstate 65, on the way back to Madison, Wisconsin from Nashville, Deb heard a song that was popular that year by Eric Clapton. And there was a line in that song that said, "Would you know my name if you saw me in heaven?" And something snapped. something snapped. Deb went home and told her parents all that was happening. Her parents loved her and accepted her just like Sarah and I said they would. And they said, it's going to be okay. And about a week later, she was on our front doorstep saying, is that deal still good? Okay. And we said, sure, come on, get in here. We'll figure it out. We'll make it up as we go. But Deb lived with us then while she was pregnant. And that was an interesting time. We'd never done anything like that before. But and then at one point, Sarah and Deb went to the doctor together. Sarah was helping Deb with stuff, and they were waiting for the doctor and said, well, I'll just take a pregnancy test. My wife did. And she said, that's kind of funny. And she laid it on the counter there, and about 10 minutes later, she went back and said, whose is this? And the doctor, that's yours. You're pregnant. And Deb was all the time trying to figure out a way to tell us she'd changed her mind and that she wanted to keep this baby. She couldn't figure out how to do that. And it just worked out perfectly, except I'm living with 2 pregnant women. But Deb didn't happen to Ashton, and Ashton was born, and it was just an amazing thing, and it was beautiful. And after Ashton was born, about a month after that, we got a card in the mail. And it was just a card like this. It says, I've never seen God, but I know how I feel. It's people like you who make him so real. And you open it up, and just, it's nice. It says, God bless you for being so special. And, it was from Deb's mom. And then you open it up, and it has something that kind of rocked my world. She said, Dear Sarah and JT, thank you for being there when my Debbie needed someone. I'll never be able to thank you enough for saving my grandchild. All we did was let someone live with us. That's all we did. You'd have done the same thing. We had the room. You get something like this, it rocks your world. It's just what it does. It lets you know how God can use someone as simple and sinful as me to do something. And in the 90s, I think we had 4 different women stay with us. And they all end up keeping their baby. We all get them the same deal. We'll adopt, but they all end up keeping their baby. And in that time, I think twice or 3 times we got pregnant. At one point, I said, no more women. But it was interesting because, and now to the backstory on Ashton. Ashton's now, I think, 30 years old. It was great to see her graduate from high school. It was so awesome. And then she got married. And I remember her at her wedding, her father and her real father, the birth father and her dad, Tim and Todd, both walked Deb down the aisle. They walked that thing out about as well as anyone could. And it's great to see Ashton. She's been married now for, I think, 5 years. And she's actually applied to do a Both Hands project. They're going to be doing a Both Hands project sometime in 2026. So that's kind of neat. But here's the thing. Seeing that, what happened is Bethany Christian Services came into our home, counseled these 4 women. They just helped them understand, help them with budget stuff, help them with, do I give the baby up, do I adopt, all that kind of stuff. And they never charged them a dime. So when I left Southwestern in 1997, I said, you know what, I want to give my life away to something that I believe in. And the most important issue to me is life, and keeping life. And I said, who does that well? Bethany. So I was on the board of Bethany. And being on the board of Bethany, here's what happened. I'm sitting there, I'm all around these people adopting. I'm on there because I saw what they did with the women who stayed at our house. I'm on there because I believe in the value of life. And I wasn't thinking about adopting, but all of a sudden you start talking, rubbing shoulders with people who are adopting. You go, okay. Yeah, maybe we can think about it. And I'd come home from a meeting, and my wife would say, well, how was the meeting? I'd say, well, it was good. We did this, we did that. We got that going on. Money looks pretty good. And there's 2 twins down at Baptist in the neonatal unit. She said, well, let's go see them. And I said, why? And she said, well, maybe we can adopt them. I said, honey, we can't adopt. Do you know how much it would cost? We just left Southwestern. We started a new company. We have no money coming in. Everything's going out. We'd have to go into our life savings. Do you want to go into our life savings? And she, okay. And then the month would go by, and we'd have some conversation about adoption. We'd talk about it. I'd go to a meeting, and I'd fall into the same trap. I'd come home, and she'd say, how was the meeting? I said, well, it was good. We did this, and we did that. And there's a little baby down at Southern Hills. Let's go see him. And I go, why? We can't avoid, we'll have to go into our life savings. Do you want to go into our life savings? And she'd say no. And that went on for a while, and at some point, she stopped me. And she said, listen, I would be happy with these 4 children the rest of my life. I'd be just as happy with 1 more. You got 4 kids over here who would love to have a new baby brother or sister. There's only one person in our family right now who's kind of holding us back. And you know what? You could go talk to your friends, go talk to anyone else about adoption, but stop talking to me about it, because I can't take the up and down and yes and no and yes and no. And I kind of put me in my place. And then meanwhile, at bedtime, I'm putting the kids to bed, and they're all praying, dear God, please let Daddy let us adopt. So it's Christmas Eve, 2001. I'm headed to the attic to get the stockings to hang by the chimney with care, because that's my job. And I get to the attic, and I see a stroller, I see a high chair, I see a crib. And the thought hits me, we got everything we need to raise another child. And then the second thought hits me. What's wrong with using a life savings to save a life? What's wrong with using a life savings to save a life? It's like God dealt with me right there with my greed and my insecurity, my envy, my lack of faith, everything. It's like I've heard some people their father takes them out to the woodshed. My father took me to the attic. And transformation happened that night. And I grabbed the stockings. I'm going downstairs, and I see Sarah coming up. I said, honey, we got a high chair, we got a stroller, we got a crib. And she thought I was going to say, it's time for a yard sale. Let's get rid of this stuff, And I just looked at her and I said, we got everything we need to raise another child. I said, what's wrong with using a life savings to save a life? And she said, are you serious? I said, yeah. She said, can I tell the kids? I said, yeah. And the next morning, they all got a note in their stockings that they were going to be a big brother or big sister. It's a great Christmas. And the next day, my wife was on it, like a dog on a pork chop. Let me tell you something. She was like calling embassies. I mean, literally calling embassies and say, do you have an adoption program? Blah, 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 blah. Because we knew all these people in the adoption world, and she was starting to make calls. And then in 2001, we started the process. 2003, September 2003, we got Gracie. Cute little thing. And it was the most important decision we probably ever made. Has rocked my world. Has rocked my world. And this is her now. She's a beautiful young lady. I've got her wrapped around my finger. But that opened my eyes. And being on the board of Bethany, here's how Both Hands started. I mean, whenever I tell people what we do at Both Hands, we help families raise money for adoptions, and we do it by serving a widow. They always look at me real nice and polite, but you can tell their eyes are glazing, and they say, how does that work? The best way to understand how Both Hands works, and most of you probably do because you've all worked on projects, but most churches don't have the understanding you guys do, okay? But I'll tell you how it's happened. I was on the board of Bethany. One year I was in charge of the fundraiser. Golf fundraiser. I like golf, so I said, let's do golf fundraiser. And it was the kind where you send letters out to people and say, would you sponsor me while I golf? Does everyone understand that concept? Like, if you get that, you'll understand this. So I sent my letters out like I was supposed to, and I had a buddy who I'm in a Bible study with, Bill Iverson. Bill sends my letter back to me. Does not include a check. The guy just took a magic marker and he scribbled across my letter. He said, JT, if you told me you were working on a widow's house, I might sponsor you. But you're just golfing. Nice cause, but not my money. I mean, it hurt my feelings a little bit. I think of Proverbs 27:6, wounds from a friend can be trusted. I mean, it did hurt my feelings, but at the same time, I'm thinking, that's a pretty good idea. And I called him a couple days later, and we laughed and talked about it, and he still didn't give me any money. But the idea just never left me. Whenever I saw a 5K or a golf tournament after that, I kept thinking, if all those people were working on a widow's house, would it be better? I didn't have the orphan part figured out. Until a couple years later, I'm in church, running a good friend of mine. Just hadn't seen him in a couple months. I said, hey, Don, what's up? And Don looks at me and says, we're adopting 4 kids from Moldova. Don already has 3 kids at home. And I said, what happened? He said, well, I went on a mission with Sweet Sleep, delivering beds to orphanages in Moldova. Fell in love with this little boy, George. Got home, started the process. And in the process, we find out George has 3 siblings. And Don just looked at me and said, we're not going to break up the siblings. And it took me back to when I was 12 years old, living on a farm in northeastern Iowa. There was 5 of us kids. One weekend, my mom and dad left to celebrate their 16th wedding anniversary, and us kids were kind of farmed out to different places. And I remember Saturday night being brought home by one of the neighbors because mom and dad were coming home. And he dropped me and one of my brothers. I was dirty. I played in the barn all day. I had to go in the basement to change. My other brother went in the front door. But I remember sitting in our basement in this chair, bending over, unlacing my boot. And my brother came down the stairs. I looked up at him. I said, are mom and dad home? And he looked at me and he said, mom and dad are dead. And I said, what? He said, mom and dad are dead. They were killed in a car accident an hour ago. And he turned around and walked upstairs. I mean, he had just hurt himself as he was walking through the house. He was just coming downstairs to tell his little brother. I mean, he was in shock. But I remember that moment. I remember hitting that cold cement floor and crying like any 12-year-old would cry. I know what it's like to be an orphan. I know what it's like to wonder what it's going to be like. I know what it's like to wonder who's going to take care of us. I know what it's like to think, are we going to be able to stay on the farm? Are we going to stay together? Hearing that kind of news, I know what it's like to try to figure out, navigate, make it all make sense when everything that keeps you tethered in life is all of a sudden snipped. It's a floating feeling and it's terrible. What's going to happen? And I'm trying to wrestle with the idea I'm never going to see mom and dad again this side of heaven. And how I wish my last interaction with my dad would have been different. But I also know what it's like to be rescued. Because 3 months before this accident, my mom and dad and my aunt and uncle, they changed their wills. That if anything would happen to one of them, the other family would take them. My aunt and uncle were, I mean, get this, just 33 years old. They lived in a really nice suburb of Milwaukee called Brookfield, just almost identical to Brentwood. Had 3 children. They took all 5 of us. I know what it's like to have somebody come in and say, we got you. It may not always be pretty, but we got you. And so back to the hallway in church, when Don says we're not going to break up the siblings, I'm the just right guy to say that to. Because I'm not going to sit there and say, are you sure? I'm sitting there. I mean, I'm the recipient of someone who said yes. Someone who said, yeah, we're going to do it. It may not be fun. It's probably not going to be fun. It's going to be challenging, but we'll do it. So when Don says, yeah, I remember very clearly the thought that went through my mind is, here's a man who's trusting God in a way that I envy. I want to have that kind of faith. And by then we had adopted Gracie. I said, I knew it was going to be expensive. I said, how much is this going to cost, Don? And he said, they're telling us $70,000 or $80,000. I said, you got any idea how you're going to do it? He said, no. I said, I think I got an idea. So long story short, Don and I, we recruited about 15 friends. We all did what my buddy suggested. We sent letters out to everyone we knew, and we said in the letter, would you sponsor me for the day while I work on this widow's house? All the money I raise is going to go towards the cost of this adoption. We found a lady, Miss Lucille, on Straw Street in Franklin. We got all the supplies donated, mostly honeydew stuff. You know, it wasn't like everything, but it was amazing. And about 30, 35 people showed up. It was a beautiful day in March. I'll never forget it. And it was awesome. And when it was all over, I asked Don, how much did we end up raising? He said, when it was all over, we had about 71 or 72,000 come in. Sorry about that, Matthew. We had 72,000. I was expecting 10 or 15. I mean, God just blessed. And it's like, I should have been thinking, it's like God was saying, dude, it's widows and orphans. Of course I'm going to bless this. This is what my heart is. You know, and it was just amazing. About 6 months later, a friend of mine said, hey, I heard what you did with Don. Would you help me do it? I said, yeah, he was adopting from Guatemala. He actually knew a widow. We knew the same lady. She was from Christ Community Church. She'd lost her husband 7 months early in a car accident. He was actually one of my son's teachers at a school, and she had a 4th grader and an 8th grader, and she needed a new roof. This is my second project. I don't know what I'm doing, but here, I want to tell you this because, and some of this stuff, I hope you're seeing how God connects all the dots. It's just, and we don't know, but God can take something that's hard and painful and make it unbelievable. I happened to be a recruiter. That was the business I'd opened up, and the area I was working in was commercial construction in Nashville. I knew all the presidents of the local construction companies, and we needed a new roof. I called the first one. I said, hey, Mike, how you doing? Good. He said, hey, listen, here's what we need. He said, what do you need? I said, well, we're doing this. We're helping a widow. We're sending letters out. He said, wait a minute. Are you that video they showed in church? I said, do you go to fellowship? You know, it's 4 services, so you don't know. And he said, yeah, that's us. He said, dude, what do you need? I said, yeah, well, we need a new roof. He said, done. Give me the dimensions. Let me tell you everything you need, and I'll have it on the lawn on Thursday morning. And then we put a new roof on. And I remember that day. It was a beautiful April day. And we had, I remember standing on that roof and looking at all the people. We had transformed the front of our yard. We transformed the back of our yard. I counted 52 people that day were working. And then I looked down. There's Bill and Lisa with Miss Diane. She's weeping. She can't believe it. And then I looked at the streets. And there was 19 cars on the street. And it made me smile. It made me think, this is how you serve a community. This is how you show a community how you serve a widow. And it took me personally back to the farm. I remember about a month after the accident. I remember it was a beautiful April day. I got off the bus, and our bus stop's about a half mile from the house. It's on a hill. You can see a lot of the farm. Got off that bus, and there in our fields were all our neighbors with their tractors and their plows and their planters. They were planting our crops. I mean, it was Leland Meyer and Bob Grana, Everett Ellison, Bert Juvick was there, Ed Cooper, Doc Weimiller, the Sandville brothers. I mean, these are my dad's buddies, making sure their buddies' kids were taken care of. I know what it's like to have your feet washed. And it was an amazing day. And that night, my wife and I went out to eat. Ooh, I was excited. She was excited, and I was talking about this is pretty cool, and she said, yeah, I know. I don't know if I've seen you this fired up in a while. You know what her words were? Her words were, you're absolutely aglow. I think that's what happens when you give your life away. We all have this part of us inside that's meant for service. And I think when you fill it up with doing something like that, something unbelievable comes out. I mean, it's visual, it's emotional, but something comes out. I said, yeah, I think I'm supposed to do this. She said, what? She's a stay-at-home homeschooling mom, 5 kids. What? She had questions. I said, yeah. Have you thought about a paycheck? Have you thought about like health care? Have you thought about, I said, yeah. Would you consider going to work outside the home? And she said, okay, it wasn't my plan, but I'll do it. And she has had an amazing career with some things that she's doing, and it amazes me how God has taken something like that and what she does. She worked with Belmont in an entry-level position. She worked her way up. She worked with Concerned Women for America for 7 years in development. I mean, she's had a huge impact on that. They keep 7 biblical principles in front of our representatives and policymakers, and now she works with Intercessors for America. They're people who love America, they love God, and they believe in the power of prayer. I say that because I want you to know it's not just about me. This is about how God takes a whole situation and says, we're gonna throw some rocks in this lake, and we're gonna make some ripples. Well, we started both hands in August of 2008. This is my favorite part. Now we've done 1,567 projects in 46 states. 1,825 widows have been served. And I talked to one after the first service this morning. That's powerful stuff. And then 1,746 kids are no longer orphans. And we've raised 23. Well, that says 23. I got to tell you, it's coming so fast right now. I think it's at 23.5 or 23.6 million we've raised for families to use in organizations. And here's a cool part. This is a part. This is like the extra. Of all that 23 million, forgot about this one. Go back to 20. That one. Go back to that one. Our average family project raises $23,000. It just changed last week, and we got the new stats in for 2025. The average is actually around $25,000 right now. I don't know if you've ever raised money, but that's a lot of spaghetti dinners. You know what I mean? I mean, we can help a family. We just don't want money to be a reason a family doesn't adopt, and we can affect that. And of all the money we've raised, 100% goes to the cause. We never take anything out for operations. I just wanted to set it up that way. When I started, I said, let's make this the most irresistible nonprofit in America. Widows and orphans, and we don't take any money out for operations. And that gets me fired up. That's what we get to do. Now, we do have to raise money. It's not like we don't have, they're not all volunteers, okay? Matthew doesn't volunteer, and no one else. These people have families. You need to pay people. And we have rent. We have expenses. And what we do every year is we practice what we preach. We do our own Both Hands project. It's called the Vision Project in memory of Ty Osmond Sr. and his son Ty Jr., a former board member. And what we do is we just go find the widows. It's gotten out of hand lately. This picture shows you. We had this year in April, we had 315 people on this project. That's a lot, and we served 20 widows, and we ended up raising $550,000 for operations because people sponsored us, churches sponsored us, and things like that. And these are some of the widows that were served that day. It's just amazing to watch them, and that's what we do. And we serve families. We also serve organizations. In fact, Jeremy's not here now, but Jeremy was part of a project, the piano keyboard. He was part of a project 2 years ago. Guys from Grace Chapel Church, is that right? Grace Academy? And one of the dads had worked on the Vision Project like 3 years. He was moved. He said, this is awesome. I want my son to experience. He went back. He and 9 dads, they got their 7th grade sons. Are you picturing this? It's a father-son project. Dads and 7th graders. And they all sent letters out. They found a widow in Spring Hill. They raised money. They served the widow together. It was an unbelievable, great video. The widow was blessed. And they raised $8,000 for the foster care closet at Church of the City. That, to me, is a perfect example of how we can do this. If you're not adopting, you can still do a Both Hands project. And that's a little bit of an advertisement there, but it's a great way. And you know what? What's it all mean? To kind of wrap it up, I just think this is all a picture, like I said earlier, how God can take something that's hard and painful and make it something that's beautiful. You may be in a situation right now where it's just hard and you don't understand how it's going to end. I'm just telling you, the accident happened when I was 12 years old. I started Both Hands when I was 52. There's 40 years difference there. I've had a few people explain to me that there's significance in that 40 years, JT. It's not like I suffered, but in that time what happened was I was trained. I had connections. I had acquaintances. I developed my faith. I went to some unbelievable churches, heard some unbelievable preachers talk about the Word of God and the importance of widows and orphans. All that happened. And it's like he was saying, JT, everything up to this point has been practice. Just tee it up and swing because this is going to be fun. And I'm 69 now, and I'm having a blast. This is so much fun. It just never gets old. And I don't know why this language fires me up, but it's this. I think about Satan and his little minions. And when he gets up in the morning with his little minions and he's got his little list, and he comes to my name, I don't want him checking the box that says not a threat. I want him thinking, he's up. And when I think of this church, some of you right now have wanted posters in the halls of Hades because you're doing something that goes totally against him. You're caring for widows and orphans, and you're doing it. Honestly, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here. If every church in America did what you guys do, we would drive the foster care system out of business. In fact, this is a county. We could do that if everyone was like you guys. You're doing your part. If you're called to do more, I want to encourage you, go ahead and do it. It's fun if you can get involved. Not everyone's called to adopt, but we're all called to take care of widows and orphans. We're all called to do something, and we all have a role. And it's, I think about when my folks were killed. There was a headline in the paper, and the next day or 2 days later, the county paper, and it's a headline that said local farmer is killed in a car. Local farmer and his wife was killed in a car accident. Othello Olson and Laura Mae Olson were killed on Saturday, March 22nd, 1969, outside of Spring Green, Wisconsin, on Highway 14, in a head-on collision. They were survived by 5 children: John, Jim, Jeff, Julie, Doreen. And it went on to other stuff. When my aunt and uncle took us in, there was no headline. Because unsung heroes don't get headlines. But unsung heroes are what make this world happen. You are unsung heroes. Honestly, when I walk in here and I see this, what's happened up here, and I think I'm in the presence of giants. And I'm so grateful for everything all of you do. Didn't chip in because, somewhere there's a 12-year-old kid lying on a cold cement floor crying because he can't figure some stuff out that was just dealt to him. He's going to need your help. He is going to need you. And he's worth it. He's worth it. Thank you.